Every piece of modern technology you touch today is part of a hidden 30,000-year-old chain reaction. The smartphone in your pocket, the internet wiring the globe, and the artificial minds blinking in our servers did not just happen. They are the direct result of a beautiful, terrifying domino effect. In this video, we are going to trace that unbroken line of curiosity. You will discover how a primitive tally carved in a bone directly built the microchip, how a flooded coal mine unlocked the loss of energy, and how human intelligence broke out of its biological skull to build a mirror made of silicon. Open your mind. The dominoes are falling, and you are about to see exactly how we decoded the universe. For 99% of human history, the universe was a theater of ghosts and monsters. Nature did not whisper its secrets to us, it roared them. To our earliest ancestors, reality was a chaotic, terrifying cascade of random events. Floods destroyed shelters without warning. Wildfires consumed forests in an afternoon. Seasons shifted like unpredictable spirits. In this brutal dawn of humanity, survival did not require understanding, it required reaction. You ran from the lightning, you hid from the cold, you fought the predator. The human mind was a mirror simply reflecting the chaos of a wild world. But then, somewhere in the deep fog of prehistory, a spark ignited. It was not a physical fire, but a cognitive one. Human intelligence did something radical, something no other species on Earth had ever attempted. We stopped just running from the chaos, we started looking for its rhythm. Look closely at these markings. This is a piece of history you can hold in your hand. The Ishango bone, carved over 20,000 years ago in Central Africa. At first glance, it looks like a weapon or a discarded scrap. But look at the notches. They are not random decorations. They are grouped, spaced, and deliberately carved. These scratches represent the exact moment human intelligence upgraded. We stopped just living in time, we began to track it. With these marks, our ancestors were counting the days between full moons. They were predicting the migrations of animals. They were keeping score against nature. This was the first massive domino to fall in the history of science. The realization that the universe is not completely random, it has a pulse. It repeats itself. And if a pattern repeats, it means the future can be predicted. Once we could predict the pulse of the seasons, everything changed. Knowing exactly when the rivers would flood and when the rains would come allowed us to drop our hunting spears and invent agriculture. Farming anchored humanity to the soil. For millions of years, humans had to spend every waking hour searching for food just to stay alive. Agriculture changed the math of survival. A single harvest could feed a community for months. And that brought a brand new revolutionary concept to the human experience, that is, surplus time. Surplus time bred surplus thought. Because we no longer had to spend every moment fighting to survive the present, we finally had the luxury to wonder about the past, the future, and the deep structure of reality. The stage was set for the ultimate shift in the human consciousness. By the 6th century BCE, the dominoes of human thought tipped into the shores of ancient Greece. Here, a thinker named Thales looked at the world and made a declaration that fractured human history. He suggested that the universe was not governed by the shifting moods of the angry gods. He argued that nature was a machine, a system that followed its own fixed, unchanging rules. Then came Pythagoras, who pushed our intelligence into the realm of the invisible. He looked past the physical world and found its underlying skeleton, mathematics. Pythagoras discovered that a string plucked at exactly half its length created a perfect musical harmony. He proved that the geometric relationships of a triangle were not opinions, they were eternal, absolute truths. Math was not just a human tool for counting sheep, it was the actual language the universe was written in. Human intelligence had officially evolved. We had gone from running away from scary shadows to realizing that the entire cosmos runs on logic, order, and geometry. We proved that the universe makes sense and that the human mind is capable of understanding it. But a single breakthrough by a single mind is fragile. If the thinker dies, the idea can die with them. Once humanity realized the universe could be decoded, we faced an insatiable new hunger. The burning desire to collect all of this knowledge, organize it, and lock it away safely in one place. The rules of nature were being discovered, written down, and woven into a grand tapestry. Human intelligence had built the foundation. Now we needed a lighthouse to store the flame. Progress is a fragile thing. The dominoes of human intelligence had built an empire of knowledge. But history is not a straight line. When the ancient world collapsed and the great library of Alexandria was lost to fire, a long intellectual winter fell over Europe. Libraries were destroyed, schools were closed, and the basic lessons of geometry and logic were forgotten by the West. To anyone alive in this dark era, it seemed the great spark of human enquiry had been permanently extinguished. The world felt terrifying and unpredictable once again. But human curiosity is like water. When blocked in one direction, it simply builds pressure until it finds a new path. While Europe drifted into sleep, the next domino tipped over in the east. A new capital of human intelligence was about to ignite. In the 8th century, the city of Baghdad became the center of the world. Under the Abbasid Caliphate, a massive intellectual movement was launched, centered around a legendary institution known as the House of Wisdom. Scholars sent emissaries to every corner of the earth to buy books. They collected the forgotten texts of Greece, India, and China, translating them into Arabic. But they did not just save this knowledge from turning to dust, they cross-pollinated it. A brilliant mathematician named Al-Khwarizmi took the revolutionary numbering system from India, combined it with the strict geometry of Greece, and invented algebra, or what we know today as algebra. This was a massive upgrade to human intelligence. We no longer just calculated static shapes, we now had a language to solve for the unknown. With algebra, human intelligence could map the movements of the stars with incredible precision. But our greatest evolutionary leap occurred when we turned our focus away from the distant sky and looked at how we see reality itself. For over 1,000 years, the greatest minds in the world believed a lie. They believed that our eyes shot out invisible rays of light to illuminate the things around us. It was a theory based on philosophy and ego. But it was completely wrong, and no one had ever bothered to prove it. In Cairo, a brilliant physicist named Ibn al-Haytham locked himself in a dark room to find the truth. By experimenting with this tiny pinhole, creating the world's first camera obscura, he proved the exact opposite of ancient philosophy. Light doesn't come out of our eyes. It bounces off the world and travels into them. Ibn al-Haytham did not just discover the science of optics. He discovered a whole new way for the human brain to think. He wrote that a scientist must not blindly trust the writings of the ancients or believe things just because they sound elegant. He declared that a seeker of truth must treat all existing theories as an enemy to be questioned, doubted, and tested through hands-on repeatable experiments. With this declaration, he handed humanity the definitive blueprint for the scientific method. We had transitioned from believing to proving. By the 1300s, this massive flood of light and logic spilled back into Europe through trade routes. Packed inside the baggage of merchants were two world-changing sparks: the scientific method and the secret to manufacturing cheap, durable paper from linen rags. Knowledge was no longer trapped in a single library, it could now be duplicated. The ideas had been saved. The rules of evidence had been written, and the paper to record it all was finally ready. Human intelligence was about to explode outward on a scale never before seen in history. Humanity was about to take these newly perfected glass lenses, turn them towards the heavens, and shatter our view of the cosmos forever. By the 14th century, the paper and ideas preserved in the East had poured into the Europe. But as human knowledge expanded, our physical biology hit a wall. Human eyes naturally degrade with age. For centuries, when a great thinker reached their 40s, their eyesight blurred and their productive years ended. Then came a seemingly simple invention: spectacles. By bending light through glass, we extended the working life of our greatest minds. But this sparked a massive unintended domino effect. Europe became obsessed with perfecting glass. We learned to clear it of bubbles and grind it into precise curves. We thought we were just fixing old eyes. In reality, we were building the ultimate weapon against ignorance. In 1609, an Italian mathematician named Galileo took two of these glass lenses, placed them inside a wooden tube, and pointed it at the night sky. For thousands of years, the highest authority, the church and the ancient philosopher Aristotle, insisted that the heavens were perfect, smooth, and that the earth was the center of everything. But the glass did not lie. Galileo looked through this telescope and saw that the moon was jagged, scarred, and covered in rough mountains. He saw 4 moons orbiting Jupiter, proving that not everything revolved around the earth. Human intelligence, aided by a piece of glass, had officially broken the old monopoly on truth. We realized that authority could be wrong and that the universe was vastly different from what we had been told. The dominoes did not just tip upward into the stars, they tipped downward into the mud. In Holland, a fabric merchant named Antony van Leeuwenhoek used the same glass-making secrets to build a tiny single-lens microscope. One afternoon, he placed a single drop of ordinary lake water under his lens. He expected to see nothing. Instead, he discovered a thriving invisible empire. He saw millions of tiny living creatures swimming, eating, and multiplying. He called them animalcules, what we now know as microbes and bacteria. In a single generation, human intelligence had used the lens to reveal 2 entirely new universes. One too large to comprehend, and one too small to see. The old, superstitious world was fracturing. If the universe was not a magical, chaotic theater controlled by spirits, what was it? Humans needed a new framework to explain how the stars moved and how the invisible world operated. The answer came from Isaac Newton. Using the new scientific method, Newton did something extraordinary. He unified the heavens and the earth. He showed that the exact same invisible force that pulls a falling apple to the ground is the very same force that holds the moon in its orbit around the earth. He called it gravity. Newton wrote down the mathematical laws of motion. He pictured the universe not as a mysterious playground of gods, but as a giant predictable clockwork machine. A machine that ran on math, where every cause had an exact measurable effect. Newton's mechanics changed the goal of human intelligence. We had gone from fearing nature to tracking its patterns to discovering its mechanical rules. And the moment humans realized the universe was a predictable machine, a thrilling new thought exploded in our minds. If the universe is a machine, then humanity can build its own machines. We can capture the raw forces of nature, master energy, and bend the physical world to our will. By the late 1700s, human intelligence hit a massive material wall. For thousands of years, our civilization ran on wood. We burned it for heat and used it to build homes and ships. But Europe had chopped down its forests, creating an energy crisis. To survive, we had to dig deep into the earth for a dirty, dense alternative, black coal. But the deeper we dug, the worse the problem became. Below the surface lay hidden pockets of groundwater. The coal mines flooded, trapping the energy humanity desperately needed. We used teams of hundreds of horses to pump the water out, but it was too slow and too expensive. This was the next desperate domino. If we could not conquer the water, our progress would freeze in the mud. We needed a miracle, and we found it by looking at a boiling kettle. When water turns to steam, it expands violently. It creates pressure. Early inventors tried to harness this, but it was an engineer named James Watt who perfected the trap. He realized that by heating water with coal and then instantly cooling the steam, he could create a vacuum. That vacuum pulled a heavy iron piston down with the force of dozens of horses. For the first time in history, human intelligence had created an artificial muscle. We were no longer relying on the muscles of animals, the unpredictable wind, or flowing rivers. We took fire and water, trapped them in iron, and created a mechanical ghost that could work 24 hours a day without getting tired. The mines were pumped dry and coal flooded the world. The steam engine was too powerful to stay hidden underground. Human intelligence quickly realized that if this engine could pump water, it could turn a wheel. And if it could turn a wheel, it could run a civilization. In less than a century, human life accelerated violently. We left our quiet farms and crowded into booming industrial cities. Distance shrank as steam trains connected continents and steamships crossed oceans in days instead of months. Human intelligence had successfully hooked society to the back of a machine. But as our factories grew hotter and faster, scientists noticed a strange puzzle about this new power. A puzzle that Newton's math could not explain. Farming gave us time, and glass gave us vision. But steam engines gave us raw muscle. For the first time, factories were running day and night. But as these engines grew larger, scientists noticed a frustrating massive problem. The engines were incredibly wasteful. Factory owners wanted to know exactly how much coal it took to get a specific amount of work. When scientists studied the heat, they discovered a strict law of nature. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change shapes, from coal to fire to steam to the turning of a wheel. But here was the catch, and it was a major roadblock for human progress. Every single time energy changed shapes, a massive amount of it escaped as useless wasted heat. The engines became boiling hot, heating up the rooms instead of turning the factory wheels. We were burning mountains of coal but losing most of our power to the air. Mechanical engines had hit a hard physical limit. Human intelligence was stuck in a world of friction, smoke, and wasted energy. The Industrial Revolution had remade the earth. We had gone from tracking patterns to unlocking the clockwork universe to building massive engines of fire and steel. But our crowded, smoking cities were facing new, terrifying crises. Disease was spreading invisibly through the air and water, and factory machinery was reaching the limits of mechanical speed. To take the next leap, human intelligence had to look beyond the heavy iron pistons we could see and touch. We had to learn to harness a silent, invisible, and terrifying current that lived in the very fabric of nature. By the early 1800s, human intelligence had built a world of iron and steam. We could see our power, smell it, and touch it. But all around us, a silent, mysterious force lay dormant. For thousands of years, electricity was seen as a divine weapon. The terrifying lightning of Zeus, an unpredictable strike from the heavens that could only destroy. But then, human curiosity did something remarkable. We trapped it. With the invention of the first chemical battery, we transformed electricity from a sudden violent explosion into a steady, controllable trickle. For the first time, we had a continuous current of invisible energy sitting on a laboratory desk. This was the next crucial domino. We had tamed the lightning, but we still had absolutely no idea what it actually was or what it could do. The breakthrough happened entirely by accident. In 1820, a Danish physicist named Hans Christian Ørsted was giving a lecture. He happened to turn on an electric current near a basic sailor's compass. To his amazement, the magnetic needle twitched. It did not point north anymore, it pointed towards the wire. This sent a shockwave through the scientific community. For centuries, electricity and magnetism were treated as two completely separate things, like water and fire. But Ørsted had just proved that an electric current creates a magnetic force. This was a profound leap for human intelligence. We realized that the forces of nature are not isolated. They are deeply connected in a hidden cosmic dance. In London, a self-taught working class man named Michael Faraday took this discovery and flipped it upside down. He asked a brilliant question. If electricity could create magnetism, could magnetism create electricity? Faraday lacked formal math training, so he visualized the universe using his imagination. He imagined invisible lines of force curving through the air around the magnets, what we call now a magnetic field. He proved that if you physically move a magnet through a coil of copper wire, a electric current magically begins to flow. With this single experiment, Faraday invented the electric motor and the generator. Human intelligence had figured out how to convert physical motion into invisible electricity and back again. We could now build power lines to send energy instantly across hundreds of miles through a thin wire. Faraday had the visual intuition, but the world needed a mathematical proof. That proof came from a Scottish genius named James Clerk Maxwell. Maxwell took everything we knew about electricity and magnetism and unified them into four breathtakingly elegant equations. He called this single unified force as electromagnetism. But as Maxwell calculated the speed of this new electromagnetic wave, he noticed a number staring back at him from his map: 300,000 kilometers per second. It was the exact, undeniable speed of light. In that stunning moment, human intelligence reached a pinnacle of understanding. Maxwell realized that light itself is an electromagnetic wave. A beam of sunlight, a lightning bolt, and the magnetic pull of the earth were all parts of the exact same cosmic symphony. We had illuminated the true underlying fabric of reality. Harnessing electromagnetism completely transformed the planet. In a flash, we wired the globe with telegraph lines and chased away the night with the electric light bulb. Human intelligence had evolved from fearing the lightning to orchestrating the invisible forces of nature. But this massive success brought a hidden crisis. When scientists used Maxwell's equations to study the hot glowing filament inside that very light bulb, the math broke down completely. The old physics of Newton and Maxwell was about to hit a terrifying paradox. A paradox that would tear reality apart. By the turn of the 20th century, physics felt complete. We had Newton's laws for the giant planets and Maxwell's equations for invisible electricity and light. Scientists proudly claimed there was nothing new to discover. But human intelligence was about to be blindsided by something as simple as a glowing light bulb. When scientists used the old laws of physics to calculate how much light a hot object should emit, the math predicted something impossible. It said a standard light bulb filament should release infinite amounts of deadly ultraviolet radiation, blinding anyone who turned it on. But reality did not behave that way. To fix this catastrophic glitch, Max Planck proposed a radical, desperate guess. Energy is not a smooth, continuous wave. It is released in tiny packet-like bursts, which he called quanta. This was the next terrifying domino. We thought the universe was a smooth flowing river. We were about to find out it was made of jagged sand. While Planck was rewriting the subatomic world, the young patent clerk Albert Einstein was about to tear down the macroscopic universe. For centuries, humanity relied on Isaac Newton's absolute truth that time flows at the exact same steady pace for everyone, everywhere in the cosmos. It was comforting, it was obvious, and it was completely wrong. Einstein looked at Maxwell's equations and realized a bizarre paradox. No matter how fast you run towards a beam of light, it always travels away from you at the exact same speed. To keep the speed of light constant, something else had to break. Einstein proved that time and space are flexible. If you travel on a hyper-fast rocket ship, your time physically slows down compared to someone standing still on Earth. Human intelligence had to abandon its deeply ingrained intuition. Space and time were no longer a rigid stage. They were a fluid, bending fabric woven together as space-time. If Einstein's relativity made the universe feel like a surreal dream, the breathing science of quantum mechanics turned it into a nightmare of pure probability. A new generation of brilliant minds pushed deeper into the atom, expecting to find a miniature solar system of neat, solid little marbles. Instead of solid marbles, they found chaos. They discovered that at the foundational level of reality, subatomic particles like electrons can exist in multiple places at the exact same time. They behave like rippling waves until the precise moment a human looks at them, forcing them to snap into a single point. Werner Heisenberg proved that you can never simultaneously know both where a particle is and where it is going. The universe was not a predictable clockwork machine after all. It was a cosmic casino running on absolute chance. This collapse of common sense terrified scientists. Even Einstein hated it, fighting against the idea that the universe was governed by dice. But human intelligence did not just look at this counterintuitive new realm. We did what we always do. We figured out how to use it. By understanding that mass and energy are just two sides of the same coin, and by mapping the chaotic probabilities of the atomic nucleus, humanity achieved the unthinkable. In 1940s, we learned to deliberately split the atom. We unlocked the primal energy that powers the sun itself. Human intelligence had evolved from counting bone notches to wielding a power that could instantly vaporize a city or power an entire nation. We had conquered the fundamental core of matter. Splitting the atom showed the terrifying destructive side of quantum mechanics. But the exact same math held a silent constructive miracle. By learning how electrons leap across the quantum barriers of a material called silicon, scientists realized they could build a tiny solid state electronic switch. A switch with no moving parts, a transistor. Human intelligence had shattered reality to pieces. But from the fragments of the quantum world, we were about to construct a microscopic mirror. A mirror that would allow us to stop decoding the outer universe and finally look inward to decode the secret script of life itself. By the mid 19th century, human intelligence had mapped the clockwork universe and built massive steam engines. But we were still blind to our own origin story. Most of humanity believed the earth was just a few thousand years old and that all living creatures had dropped from heaven completely formed. But industrial mining and geology forced us to look downward. The deep layers of the earth acted like a stone clock, revealing fossils of bizarre, extinct creatures that lived millions of years ago. In 1859, Charles Darwin dropped the next massive domino. He proposed the theory of natural selection. He argued that life was not static. It evolved over vast eons of time. Creatures that developed accidental advantageous traits survived long enough to pass those traits to their offspring. Human intelligence finally realized that we were not separate from nature, We were a branch on an ancient unbroken tree of life. But Darwin faced a frustrating black box. He knew that traits were passed down, but he had absolutely no idea how. While Darwin was looking at the grand scale of global ecosystems, a lonely monk named Gregor Mendel was looking at peace in a garden. By carefully crossbreeding thousands of plants, Mendel discovered that traits like color and height are not mixed together like paints. They are passed down as a distinct mathematical units of inheritance. Decades later, scientists realized these units lived inside the nucleus of every cell, packed into microscopic structures called chromosomes. Human intelligence was closing in on the mystery. We realized that inside our bodies lay a hidden library, a set of blueprints that dictates the shape of a bird's beak, the color of a flower, and the structure of the human brain. But to read the blueprints, we needed the quantum tools we had just unlocked in the physics lab. The dominoes of physics and biology collided in 1952 in a London laboratory. A brilliant chemist named Rosalind Franklin used a cutting-edge physics technique, X-ray crystallography. She shot high-energy X-rays through a purified fiber of genetic material known as DNA. When the rays hit the molecule, they bounced off, scattering into a pattern on a piece of photographic film. That grainy image was Photo 51. It was a molecular shadow map. By analyzing those fuzzy dots, young researchers Francis Crick and James Watson realized the truth. DNA is shaped like a twisted interlocking ladder, a double helix. Human intelligence had finally cracked open the vault. We had found the physical master key to all living things. What they found inside the double helix did not look like an organic fluid, it looked like a machine. The rungs of the DNA ladder are made of just 4 chemical bases, abbreviated as A, T, C, and G. In that stunning realization, human intelligence experienced a profound paradigm shift. We realized that biology is not just flesh and bone. Biology is information science. A blade of grass, a deadly virus, a blue whale, and a human being are all written in the exact same quaternary code. Life is software. A tiny sequence of letters tells a cell how to build an eye or fight a disease. We had gone from wondering how we evolved to reading the literal source code of our own existence. Cracking the code of life completely redefined what it means to be human. We went from tracking nature's patterns to realizing we could rewrite them. By the turn of 21st century, we had successfully mapped the entire human genome, all 3 billion letters of our personal blueprint. But look at the ultimate domino effect. We had just discovered that life runs on a digital code. And at the exact same moment in history, using the quantum silicon transistors we built in the physics lab, We were constructing electronic machines designed to process massive amounts of code. By the mid 20th century, human intelligence had conquered the atom and unlocked the code of life. But our brains were facing a new crisis, a data bottleneck. The math required to predict the weather, decode genetic strands, and design rocket ships had become too massive for a human with a pencil to solve in a lifetime. We had hit a biological speed limit. To break this barrier, a British mathematician named Alan Turing dropped the next revolutionary domino. He asked a radical question: does thinking require a biological brain? Turing conceptualized a machine that could perform any task if it was broken down into simple logical instructions using just two states, on or off, true or false, 1 or 0. Human intelligence had done something unprecedented. We isolated the process of logic from human flesh, turning thought into mechanical process. Early computers were fragile giants. They ran on glass vacuum tubes that burnt out every few hours, consumed enough electricity to power a small town, and took up entire buildings. They were powerful, but they were isolated. But then, the domino effect of quantum physics, which we unlocked back in chapter 6, changed everything. By replacing those giant glass tubes with microscopic silicon transistors, computers began to shrink. Every 2 years, the chips became twice as powerful and half the size. Computers moved from military basements to corporate offices to family desktops and finally into the pockets of everyday citizens. Human intelligence was no longer just biological. It was being augmented by pocket-sized silicon alloys. As billions of these silicon mines spread across the planet, the next domino fell inevitably. Isolated computers were not enough. In the late 20th century, scientists needed a way to instantly share data between research labs. They created a protocol to link these machines together. The internet was born. This was the birth of a global nervous system. Fiber-optic cables were laid across ocean floors, and satellites were launched into orbit. For the first time in history, a thought, an equation, or a discovery made by a human brain in Tokyo could be transmitted instantly to a silicon screen in London. We did not just build a tool, we wrapped the entire planet in a digital consciousness. By connecting every human brain to every silicon machine, humanity unleashed a monster, the data tsunami. We began generating more information in a single day than our ancestors had created in entire millennia. Every smartphone click, every medical scan, every weather telescope, and every financial transaction became part of an infinite digital ocean. But this massive success brought us back to the exact same crisis Alan Turing tried to solve. Human intelligence was drowning in its own creation. No human mind or even a stadium full of scientists could look at a petabytes of climate data or millions of genetic sequences and find the hidden patterns. We had built a mirror made of silicon and the reflection was too complex for us to read. Faced with an ocean of information we could no longer process, human intelligence reached the ultimate tipping point. We realized we could no longer just program machines to follow strict recipes. We had to build machines that could learn. The intelligence that began by scratching lines on a baboon bone to track the moon has now built a digital mirror. And as we look into that silicon reflection, the image is starting to blink back at us. We are no longer the only minds in the room. We have reached the edge of the map. The domino effect that began 30,000 years ago with a single scratch on an animal bone has accelerated into a blinding blur of progress. Human intelligence has successfully decoded the clockwork laws of gravity, tamed the invisible waves of electromagnetism, split the atom, and read the source code of biological life. But all of those monumental leaps were just the prologue. For our entire history, science was a tool used by a biological ape to understand an external universe. In the 21st century, the final dominoes began to fall inward. We stopped just using our intelligence to change the world. We began using our intelligence to rewrite intelligence itself. Faced with an ocean of data too massive for human minds to grasp, we built a new kind of mind. We stopped typing rigid lines of code and step-by-step recipes into computers. Instead, we mimicked the structure of our own brains, building artificial neural networks. We gave the machines a simple command: learn. By ingesting the collective knowledge, language, and data of our entire species, these artificial minds did something extraordinary. They began to see patterns we were blind to. They began folding proteins to cure disease in seconds that would have taken human scientists decades. They began discovering new materials, calculating quantum equations, and generating ideas. Human intelligence had successfully broken out of its biological skull. We had created a thinking mirror. But the feedback loop did not stop with silicon. The moment we paired our artificial intelligence with the biological code of life, the nature of evolution changed forever. For 4 billion years, every living creature on Earth was shaped by Darwin's blind, slow law of natural selection, random mutations over millions of years. Today, human intelligence has taken the wheel. With gene editing technologies like CRISPR, We are transitioning from a species shaped by evolution to a species that directs evolution. We are learning to edit hereditary blindness out of our code, engineer crops to survive a changing climate, and program our own cells to hunt down cancer. We are no longer just a leaf on the tree of life. We are the gardeners. And yet, even this is not the end of domino effect. As our silicon machines hit the physical limits of atomic size, we are reaching back to the bizarre quantum paradoxes we uncovered a century ago. We are building quantum computers. These machines do not think in simple 1 or 0 of Alan Turing. They compute using the fluid, overlapping probabilities of the subatomic world, solving calculations in minutes that would take a standard supercomputer thousands of years to process. We are preparing to hand our greatest AI models the keys to a quantum engine. We are stepping onto a horizon where human and machine minds will look into the deepest fabric of reality and unlock secrets we don't even have the words to ask yet. We stand at a unique moment in the history of the universe. We are the bridge between the simple matter we came from and the infinite potential of what lies ahead. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. The journey of science was never about a single person, a single discovery, or a single empire. It is a single beautiful unbroken chain of curiosity. One tile tipping into the next, driven by a insatiable hunger for order. The dominoes have not stopped falling. We are simply the generation lucky enough to watch the next tile tip into the unknown.